The Legend 650 AM WSM, and that's the Ballad of String Bean and the Stell, 728. I'm Eddie Stubbs, and that particular song right there is a very powerful ballad. I'd hoped that we could have set it up ahead of time, but we just decided to go on into it. But Sam, you have talked about this when you came to visit with us previously out at the radio station, and you and your band were guests on Music City Roots out at the Loveless Barn, and you talked about that. And we played that song, the live version, on WSM quite a bit, and we're still playing it from that night at Music City Roots. That's a very deep song, and as I mentioned before to the people before we took the break, people who know about that awful tragedy when that happened back in 1973, and local people especially that haven't forgotten, and longtime fans of the Opry and traditional country music. I mean, that's something it's embedded in your memory, you know. Yeah,
it really is. And well, that song all came about thanks to Verlin Thompson and Guy Clark, who I was fortunate, to get to co-write with them on this. And they started it up, and then one day Guy Clark calls me just to say we need a real hillbilly on this. We need a hillbilly bluegrasser's input on this. Because we wanted to make it. It was in our mind to make it sound like a sort of like a folk song, a folk ballad, and it was, as luck would have it, I had received. After my father had passed away, I wasn't able to be there when, my sister's going through his things and, figuring out what to do with them. But they gave me some boxes of things, and so I'm going through my boxes, and I found an old yellowed-up Nashville Banner newspaper. And I wondered how he got this, because he lived up in Bowling Green. I didn't even know if they sold them up there. I wonder if it came from Mr. Acuff, perhaps. My dad was a friend of Mr. Acuff and bashful brother Oswald. So I got to reading this story, and it was just a very chilling picture on the front of this newspaper, because it was a picture of an auction taking place at String Bean and Estelle's farm, and it looked like there were a few hundred people in the audience, and the picture was taken from the back of the person holding up on a wire coat hanger this pair of bib overalls, and they were auctioning them off. And that was just a chilling photo to me. And I remember reading the story and then pretty much taking that straight to the recycling bin. It just gave me chills, and I said, okay. So, about a week later, Guy Clark happens to call up and say he'd like to involve me in this String Bean song. We'd made short mention of it once or twice before. So I said, great, I can come over. So I go over to Guy's house and go in, and we start talking about String Bean and Estelle and what happened, and how the two cousins, whose last name was Brown, murdered them. And there's even a verse about, Grandpa Jones finding them after they'd been killed. The money that was found in String Bean, the bib of his overalls. But I told Guy Clark, I said, I wish I'd have brought this newspaper over. They were auctioning off String Bean's overalls. I can't tell you exactly what Guy said, but I can tell you that he, to the effect of, "You idiot, if you'd have brought that paper over, we'd have the whole song written already." And but as we know, Guy Clark can pretty much just grab a song anywhere.
Excuse me for interrupting. They had the song. They had the idea of wanting to write something about String Bean and Estelle. Then his wife.
They had about the first verse, and but we sat down and pretty much wrote it in one afternoon, and. It was giving us all kind of chill bumps as we did it, because I got to see String Bean probably about 4 or 5 times as a kid, and of course any of us that knows how String Bean's stage outfit looked, how the long shirt came all the way down to the knees, then he had the little short pair of pants with a belt on, and we believe, some of us believe he started hip-hop fashion. Definitely.
He was ahead of his time about 25 years or so, wasn't he?
Definitely.
30 years, I guess.
And he was, and just the other night, it's within the last couple of weeks, I've heard one of his old Opry performances played on WSM, and he sounded marvelous. I mean, his banjo picking was so strong and in time, and it was just a pleasure to hear. And I mean, because some people may have only known him as the entertainer on Hee Haw. But, I mean, he was Bill Monroe's first banjo picker.
That's right. There was a lot more to string bean than just the comic on Hee Haw, and he was good in that role, and that's where he became so famous. It gave, like Grandpa Jones, it gave him a whole new career, and it changed their lives forever, financially, too, for the better. But if you go back and get some of his recordings, a lot of which are still in print, you can find out what a good musician he was, and a lot of good old-time songs, and he was a fine comedian, you know, and to see him in person, it was even more special. This brings me to another point, you know, I want the people to know about. Some people know this, some don't, but Sam talked about growing up in Bowling Green, and that's what, an hour from here, for those who don't know, hour north here, up Interstate 65, just in southern Kentucky. But Sam had a great education musically, being able to watch the great country music shows that used to air out of Nashville on Saturday afternoons, like Porter Wagner, the Wilburn Brothers, the Flatt and Scruggs Show. And he listened into WSM all the time, and his family, and he had a wonderful set of parents who loved music, and his dad especially loved music and fiddle music and encouraged him greatly. And you were really brought up right, because you got the true foundation of what it was all about, from the early origins of old-time string band music and Grand Ole Opry style country music, acoustic country music, all the way up through what was happening at that time as you're a youngster in the early 60s, growing up. And then you took what you had learned, and you learned well, and then went off and did your own music. But you never turned your back on those people that you met as a youngster or that music, and it always meant so much, and you've carried that all your life through, it just seems like.
Well, always, you know, I take great pride in you know, I was around for certain things when I could see the beginnings of certain music. 'Cause I mean, I barely remember, like, maybe my sisters would have Everly Brothers records, you know, when they were just young and making these hit records. Or on the other side of the coin for, you know, old-time country music fans, you know, I got to see Whitey Ford, the Duke of Paducah, do his act, you know. And certain Opry entertainers every once in a while would come up to Bowling Green, play at the Bowling Green High School. You know, I remember getting to see Billy Grammer there, and Sonny James. I think my sisters and I got to play on a show once with Sonny James, and I still got this autographed picture from Sonny James that says, "Sammy, I know you're going to be big someday." And sure enough, here I am, almost 6 feet tall.
I love that. Sonny listens a lot at night. I hope he got to hear that. That's great.
Well, he was a really friendly guy to me. Very nice.
Your father's friendship with Roy Acuff and all the Smoky Mountain Boys, especially Bashful Brother Oswald and Charlie Collins and Howdy Forrester, was very, very important and very influential on you. And Mr. Acuff put you on the Opry playing the fiddle almost without any notice one night, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I couldn't really remember how old I was. My dad had a memory like an elephant, and so he said I was 16, and we would come down. Usually, we'd come to the Friday night Opry more than the Saturday one, because I was usually playing barn dance or something up in Kentucky on Saturday nights, which my father, you know, would take me to. I couldn't go yet, couldn't drive yet. And, we were just standing on side stage one night and listening at the Ryman Auditorium on a Friday night Opry. And Mr. Acuff told my dad, he says, go get his fiddle, I'm putting him on. And fortunately, I didn't know it was going to happen, because, I mean, I think, you know, at age 16, if you were standing there knowing you were about to play on the Ryman Auditorium stage, the Grand Ole Opry, I'd probably get so nervous you couldn't play. On Roy Acuff's show, too. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, with whatever Mr. Acuff said, that was what was going to happen. Yeah. And What did you play that night, Sam? Do you remember? I think, well, it was a tune that Mr. Acuff liked very much that I learned off a Dillard's record that featured Byron Berline on the fiddle called Drunken Billy Goat. But it would just be... I asked, he told. What's so funny about that? We're not telling on any one Opry performer or anything, but I mean, yeah, I saw all of a sudden my dad just walked up with my fiddle, and he said, "Roy's putting you on. What are you going to play?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, play the Drunken Billy Goat. Roy likes that one. So that's pretty much how it came down. And I mean, like I say, and you know, it was one of those things that just happened so quickly that years later you could look back and go, you know, wow, you know, that's, I mean, Roy Acuff himself. And of course, I was interested in all kinds of music, so not only was I listening to Roy Acuff, Bill Monroe, but I was also watching the Ed Sullivan Show back then. I just felt like it was a very fortunate time to grow up because TV was my friend. And we lived on a farm, and really it wasn't like we could ride our bike over to somebody's house and hang out because it wasn't that way. We lived miles from other people, and so the radio and TV were my friend. And now looking back, of course, I realized how fortunate that it was to be as close as we were to Nashville, and that my dad was willing to climb on the roof and readjust the antenna every once in a while to get reception. And but I mean, I really never thought of the fact that other people didn't get to see these performers like we did until I first went out to Idaho to a fiddle contest. I was talking to some of the other, and by the way, when I went to Idaho the first time, it seems kind of ironic to me that, you know, growing up around this area, Tennessee, Kentucky area, that I didn't know any other kid fiddlers. I didn't know any other kids that played fiddle or music for that matter. And it wasn't until I met a young fiddler we're the same age from up in Louisville named Hoot Hester that I even met another kid fiddler in Kentucky. Of course, Hoot is now the staff fiddler on the Grand Ole Opry. But now I realize how fortunate I was because, and I make teaching videos sometimes. There's different companies that make them. I make them for homespun tapes. And but the TV was sort of like my teaching videos because I was pretty good at figuring out the tunes by ear off of fiddle records and bluegrass records and country records, but getting to see the people play the instruments just unlocked a whole door. I mean, there's the main G chord you make on the mandolin, like Bill Monroe makes. I could not figure out how to do it. Finally, one day I see him on TV, and it was just, you know, you unlock the door of, that's how you do that. And so that's how come I now realize that teaching videos can be of great aid for youngsters learning to play.
Which came first, the fiddle or the mandolin?
Mandolin. Started playing mandolin at age 11. And
then the fiddle started when?
Somewhere around age 13. Mm-hmm. No prompting from Charlie Bush whatsoever to play the fiddle.
That's his daddy.
Yeah, I'm kidding. He encouraged me greatly to play the fiddle because, I mean, his first love was fiddle music. And it was really his love of fiddle music that led us both into listening more to bluegrass. But we'd listen to these Tommy Jackson fiddle albums. And folks, Eddie will tell you when Tommy Jackson's playing at night on these great old country records. And in many ways, he wrote the book on how you do it. And
he really did.
Playing a hoedown or Ray Price songs or just, you know,
Western swing, bluegrass,
yes.
He could do it all.
Yes. And so on Tommy's records, he had a mandolin player playing along with him. And for some reason, the sound of the mandolin, the sound of the mandolin and the fiddle playing together has always been a pretty sound to me. And he would have the mandolin player play in unison with him on these fiddle tunes. But it wasn't the same way bluegrass mandolin players played. I mean, this player was note for note just like Tommy, and it was just really a wonderful sound. And I never knew who played the mandolin until years later when I was playing on a session. Once again, just old enough to get in on some of these great pickers around town that made Nashville music what it is. So this was a rhythm guitar player named Ray Edenton. And Ray, we got to talking, and somehow the name Tommy Jackson came to pass, and he said, "Oh, well, I played guitar on all those records." I said, "Really? Who played the mandolin?" He said, "Hank Garland." And of course, Hank Garland was I think of him as a jazz guitar player. And then I said,
Wrote Sugarfoot Rag.
Yes, Sugarfoot Garland. And I said, "Well, I didn't know he played the mandolin." And Ray Edenton said, "He didn't." He was just such a great musician that Tommy wanted a mandolin on those records and said he learned them right on the spot before they cut them, and that's
still one of the greatest ways to learn because it's just definitive. It's the melody and it's simplistic, but try to play it that simplistic. It's a big challenge, isn't it?
It is.
It really is.
And then, of course, when you're young, it's I used to hear people say about my playing, that I needed to leave some of those notes out. And I never understood that. And the older I get, the more I leave out.
It's not about how much you know, it's about knowing how much to play.
That's
what
right.
More important to know what not to play.
And it depends on what song.
Exactly.
And that's another thing I'm trying to learn to do, to play for the song. And I think getting around certain people, say for instance Doc Watson. I've been fortunate to play over the years a number of Doc Watson's records, and Doc just he says it in a subtle way, but he talks about playing tastefully. And I always paid attention to whatever Doc says, because it's interesting. If you're playing along beside of him, whatever he does sounds perfect to me, every note.
Like Earl Scruggs.
Absolutely. And then if you sort of play more on the same tune, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't fit in. It doesn't fit in.
No.
So I've just tried to learn to, more than anything, to play for what that song needs. And if it's a song, if it's a song I wrote that I know we want to have improvisational sections, well then go ahead and solo and have fun with it. But like on the tune, the String Bean in Estelle, a solo with a lot of notes wouldn't fit the song.
Right. Sam Bush is our special guest tonight. He's got some great insights on music, and if you want to know more about him, in the time we'll have allowed to talk about, visit sambush.com. There's information on there about his personal appearance schedule. You can purchase product from him. There's information on there about the videos, upcoming concert appearances. There's a news page on there, all kinds of great things. Very user-friendly, sambush.com. We come back, he's going to pick and sing live for us, so we're looking forward to that. So we'll be back with more of our Intimate Evening Series program in just a few minutes.